Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1218B, and today's date is March 2nd, 2017, and the title of the episode is, The Deep State is Positioning Itself, Something Big is About to Unfold. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Well, it looks like the deep state, the establishment, the central bankers, they are making their move. And it looks like they're going after Jeff Sessions. Now, the question is why. But let's see what's going on here. First of all, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. She led the effort late on Wednesday night, accusing Sessions of lying under oath during confirmation proceedings about his contacts with Russia, or with Russians. Now, Jeff Sessions lied under oath during his confirmation, she said, before the Senate. Under penalty of perjury, he told the Senate Judiciary Committee, I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign. I did not have communications with the Russians. We now know that the statement is false, Pelosi said. She then added, the Attorney General must resign. He needs to leave. Now, this is what they want him to do. But when you listen to the C-SPAN transcript of the meeting, well, that tells a completely different story, coming from Al Franken, who's a senator. CNN just published a story alleging that the intelligence community provided documents to the president-elect last week that included information that Russian operatives claimed to have compromising personal and financial information about Mr. Trump. These documents also allegedly say there was a continuing exchange of information during the campaign between Trump surrogates, intermediaries for the Russian government. Again, I'm telling you this as it's coming out. So you know, but if it's true, it's obviously extremely serious. And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with Russian government in the course of the campaign, what will you do? Sessions then says, Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with Russians, and I am unable to comment on it. Franken said very well. Now, Sessions was not actually asked whether he or anyone affiliated with the campaign had any kind of communication with the Russians. He was asked first about a continuing exchange of information, repeated contacts between the campaign representatives and the Russian government. So we could see right now that Pelosi is wrong. And we have to understand, he was part of the Senate Arms Committee. He did have contact with Russians. He had contacts with the Chinese. He had contacts with Ukrainians. He had contact with many different government officials. And it's not a crime to talk to any of these individuals. But what we're seeing right now is the deep state, they're pushing the Russian agenda. They're not giving up. And we can see right now they're going full throttle. Now, the question is, why don't they want Jeff Sessions as Attorney General? I mean, is this just a distraction? Or do they want to remove him completely? Well, at this point, they have no proof. There's absolutely nothing here. And Sean Spicer, he really sums it up. And here's a clip of what he said.
Should there be a special prosecutor? Darrell Issa has called for a special prosecutor to look into this.
Right, and I guess my question would be a special prosecutor for what?
Look into the whole Russia connection.
And here's my right, and I guess
he was part of the campaign. Sessions was part of the campaign.
I understand, but here's my question, Jonathan. We have now for 6 months heard story after story come out about unnamed sources say the same thing over and over again, and nothing's come of it. Right? We've heard the same people, the same anecdotes, and we've heard reports over and over again. And as Chairman Nunes very, very clear today, he has seen nothing that corroborates that. So at what point you've got to ask yourself, what are you investigating?
Well, Russian interference, beyond
no, and I think that both the House and the Senate have looked at it. You know as well as I do that the intelligence community has looked at it as well. There's a big difference. I think that Russia's involvement and activity has been investigated up and down. So the question becomes at some point, if there's nothing to further investigate, what are you asking people to investigate?
So Spicer kind of summed it up where he says that we've had this before, there was no proof before, and once again, there is absolutely nothing. Now, Huckabee is out there, and he's saying that there's a slush fund in the Department of Justice. When they basically settle cases, they take those funds and they put it into something called a slush fund at the Department of Justice. And while Obama, during his term, they took that money and they handed it out. And they basically handed it to many different groups. And what he's saying right now, Mike Huckabee, is that this is one of the major problems. They don't want the Attorney General looking into any of this. Now, the other thing is, it looks like the Department of Justice was getting involved in the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And we can see right now that whenever we see something like this, a witch hunt with no proof whatsoever, it's to distract. It's wag the dog type of maneuver. And this is what we're seeing right now. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Sweden and their migrant problem. And Trump was out there saying that there is a problem. And then we had those riots break out where individuals were, setting cars on fire, breaking windows. And it turns out that Trump was absolutely right and the corporate media was completely wrong. So independent journalist Tim Pool, he decided to head to Stockholm for a first-hand look at what is going on in Sweden. And unfortunately, upon arrival, well, he didn't get to do that much. He didn't get to do any type of investigating because what happened was when he went into the area of Rinkeby, what happened was there were masked men who approached him, threatened him, and he had to be escorted out with police. 60 Minutes, their crew got a similarly warm welcome there also when they were in Sweden on February 19th. So there are problems in these areas. And we can see that the corporate media, they're just hiding all of it. They don't want anyone to know what is really going on. Now, the House Intelligence Committee has agreed on parameters of investigation of alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. Now, they're going to be doing an investigation, and there's the panel that is being created. We see Chairman Devin Nunes and Ranking Member Representative Adam Schiff, both of California, agreed on terms of the investigation. And this is what they're going to look at. What Russian cyber activity and other active measures were directed against the United States and its allies? Did the Russian active measures include links between Russia and individuals associated with political campaigns or any other U.S. persons? What was the U.S. government's response to these Russian active measures, and what do we need to do to protect ourselves and our allies in the future? What possible leaks of classified information took place related to the intelligence community assessment of these matters? Now, if the first statement here proves to be that there's nothing at all, which most likely there won't be any, the rest is a waste. So we can see right now that most likely there's no evidence whatsoever. Actually, they produced no evidence of any wrongdoing, of any type of cyber attacking. The only cyber attacks that we've ever seen were from DHS into different state elections. Georgia was one of them. And right now, there have been no reports or any evidence whatsoever that Russia hacked any of the election polls in any of the states. Nothing. No one even said there was a problem, except from DHS. That's where they track the IP address back to. We see out in San Diego, General Electric in conjunction with AT&T and Intel Corp, well, they're going to be installing cameras, microphones, and sensors on 3,200 streetlights in San Diego this year. This is going to begin in July. Now, this is part of their new smart city scheme that aims to monitor traffic and crime. Now, we know that's not what this is for. We know this is to track individuals. And of course, people are out there questioning whether this is an overreach into personal privacy, which is something that wasn't properly investigated prior to approving this plan. Now, Jen LeBron of the mayor's office said, it's anonymous data with no personal identifiers. Well, wait a minute. If they're going to install all of this with cameras, and they're going to be tracking all of this, and they're not going to be doing any data harvesting, what's the purpose of it? Because according to GE and the city, they're going to locate gunshots, estimate crowd sizes, check vehicle speeds and other tasks. They're going to look for individuals that are committing crime. But if they're not capturing any, identifiers, what are they really doing here? And we know this is not true, because what they're installing here is technology to track. It's technology to use facial recognition. Basically, what they're doing is they're setting up a spy network on the people. And we've seen this throughout many, many different cities. So what they're saying, not really true. And we can see right now that the deep state, they're still pushing their agenda. Twitter is continuing its crackdown on abusive behavior and hate speech on their platform. Now, their latest attempt is to curb abusive speech on their platform. And users across Twitter right now are reporting that their accounts are being limited, we've mentioned this before, as punishment for the violation of Twitter's rules. And tweets are not appearing on people's timelines. They can't see other people's tweets. And it's kind of like a temporary shadow ban. Now, Twitter is calling this their new anti-abuse measure. And we aim to only act on accounts when we're confident, based on our algorithm, that their behavior is abusive. So we can see right now they're going to decide what you can and cannot see based on algorithms, period. Now, what's abusive to one person might not be abusive to another. And why are they so worried about being abusive? I mean, think about this throughout time. Before social media, when you were in school or at a job, and you got into an argument with someone, and someone didn't like you, and they called you names. I mean, was there a shadow ban that was placed on? No, you learned how to deal with it. This makes you the person you are. You learn how to deal with these different situations. And I guess this is how we got safe spaces. And again, once again, why do we need safe spaces? Because words can't hurt you. And people have the freedom to say things. And listen, if you don't want to hear something, block it. That's it. That's all you have to do. If you want to hear it and you want to respond, respond. But without understanding and without experiencing life, well, guess what? No one's going to know how to handle anything. And this is why we see what we see today. With all the youth out there screaming, yelling, carrying on, and crying. Think about a child who wants a piece of candy and the parent says no. What does the child do? Stamp their feet, cry, scream, yell, hit things, throws things until they get their way. Look familiar? It sure does. And these safe spaces, they're absolutely ridiculous. Because with them, you will not be able to handle life. Just like everyone getting a trophy in a baseball game. There's no winners or losers. Everyone is the same. Well, when you're in life and you lose and you have problems, how do you deal with it? You won't know how. In bowling, they put up these gutter balls so you could never get a gutter ball. So in life, that means you never get a gutter ball? Well, there's gutter balls all the time. Need to learn how to deal with it. And we can see what the deep state has done. They indoctrinated the children into thinking that they're special. There's no losers. Everything's always okay. And if we don't get our way, all we need to do is carry on. I need to go to my safe space, my crib, my safe room, and have my whoopee or whatever you have to calm yourself down. I mean, life is not like this. Life, fastballs, curveballs, potholes. Life is filled with many different instances of things that you'll never expect to experience. And without having all of this behind you, the experiences, you will not be able to handle it. Now, in North Korea, we see that Kim Jong-un and his administration is saying that they're rejecting the Malaysian autopsy, because Malaysia is saying that they found the VX nerve agent. That's what was used to kill Kim Jong-nam, Kim Jong-un's half-brother. And North Korea saying, well, that's not how we believe he died. We believe he died from a heart attack. And there are a lot of questions about the VX nerve agent. How come it didn't affect anyone else? And we can see at this point that North Korea right now, they are saying that this whole thing doesn't make sense. They're even bringing it up that, okay, how come the women didn't get sick? All right, maybe they took the antidote, but what about the rest of the people that were touching Kim Jong-nam? What about the rest of the individuals in the airport? They might have touched different things. And they're saying that Kim Jong-nam, he had a heart problem. They found medication for diabetes, medication for heart problems, medication for high blood pressure. And we know that the CIA uses different methods to cause heart attacks. So this is very interesting right off the bat. And we know why this was being done. Because the UN classifies VX as a weapon of mass destruction. And we see already that South Korea, the corporate media, they're out there saying that North Korea has chemical weapons. It's the same story that has been used in Syria. We see Taiwan right now. They have implemented their SAM missile system, and China has now sent warplanes for a joint exercise in protesting the missile system that they set up. So we can see that things are heating up in this area, and we know that the United States government, the deep state, I should say, well, they're still pushing their agenda. NATO right now is preparing for a Taliban spring campaign out in Afghanistan, so things are going to heat up there. We see the UN-backed government in Libya. Well, they're on the verge of collapse. The whole thing is just completely falling apart. That means the United States government, central bankers, the deep state, they're going to be going into Libya very soon to set things straight. They're already in Yemen, bombing Yemen right now. There were 23 airstrikes carried out, and they've bombed Al-Qaeda. Now, we have to go back in time and understand who is Al-Qaeda. When the United States government, central bankers, CIA, the deep state, they're pushing to have a regime change, they use Al-Qaeda. These are paid mercenaries. They use the Islamic State. They use Al-Sham. They use Boko Haram. These terrorist groups, these paid mercenaries, are used to overthrow the government of the country, to have regime change. Once the country has had regime change, and the United States has their puppet government in there, Al-Qaeda is now the people who do not want the puppet government in there. Because, as we know, there's a declaration of war where the president can use drones on Al-Qaeda. So they need to call all these individuals Al-Qaeda. And they're bombing inside of Yemen. And they're bombing Al-Qaeda. Well, what's happening here is that the Houthis, they're taking back their country. And we can see right now, they're trying to stop this from happening. This is why they had the UN-backed government in Libya, which completely fell apart. Since that's falling apart, and Haftar, General Haftar, is now working with the Russian government, we can see that most likely the deep state is going to try to make their move into Libya. Something might happen there. We see the Syrian army, they've recaptured Palmyra. The Russian forces helped them do this. And we can see that the Islamic State pretty much is doomed inside of Syria at this point. Now, the U.S. is out there, Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend, saying that Russian planes bombed close to U.S. troops in northern Syria. And Russia is denying this because they are saying they're in contact, and the U.S. representative, well, they provide coordinates of where the U.S.-backed opposition forces in the region are. And they're saying that they didn't have any planes, and Syria didn't have any planes in that area. So that is not true, they're saying. And we understand that the U.S. right now is setting up the base in Manbij. They're protecting that entire area because what we've learned is that the Syrian Democratic Forces, this is the new group that the U.S. put together of all Syrians because the Free Syrian Army was made up of mostly non-Syrians, so they had to find paid mercenaries that were specifically Syrian. They set it up, and they're protecting that area because Turkey and the Free Syrian Army, they're coming to attack that area. And we can see right now the United States separated themselves from the Free Syrian Army because they've created this new Syrian Democratic Forces. So we can see they're trying all these different things, and they're separating out Syria right now, saying this is our part, this is the Syrian Democratic Force, they are Syrians, and it looks like they're trying to maneuver their way into splitting up Syria right now. And of course, what is happening right now is they're putting a lot of pressure on Assad because they're using a August of 2016 UN report to place sanctions on Syrian officials, and China and Russia, they vetoed the sanctions, the UN Security Council vote. And we can see that the US, France, and the UK said, well, they're going to do this outside of the UN, and they're going to place sanctions on individuals. Now, when you actually go to the report, this is a report made by the UN, 98 pages. And when you look at it and you read it, well, they actually have no proof. Because, for example, there are 3 standards of proof listed in the report, one of which is overwhelming evidence to support the conclusion, the second, strong evidence, and the third, sufficient evidence. Beyond that is insufficient evidence. In each of the 3 cases where investigators said there was evidence to say that Syrian military was responsible for an attack, it is at the very lowest standard of proof that has been reached. In other words, the evidence wasn't sufficiently good to declare that Syria had dropped chlorine to a standard that could be considered strong or overwhelming. And then we come to find out, how did they do their research? We find that, well, they didn't actually go to Syria. They talked to the white helmets. They talked to individuals. They looked at tweets. So the whole thing is propaganda. They really don't have evidence whatsoever. But this is what the United States is using to convince everyone. But if you actually read the report, you see there's really no evidence whatsoever. And we can see what's happening right now. The deep state, the establishment, the central bankers, they're getting ready to unfold something very big. I mean, think about what is happening here. We have the economy falling apart. We have the deep state pushing war in all of these areas. They're still trying to reach their goals, and everything right now is coming to a head, and they're running out of time. Time is not working for them right now. And we can see that they're planning something big. Most likely it's going to happen as we approach the spring and summer, because we can see from the March 15th date, the debt bomb that's going to go off, the deterioration of the economy. They need to get something started. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.